the companies winning with AI aren't the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones who are starting right now. If you've been waiting for someone to cut through the noise and show you exactly how AI could transform your work, your wait is over. Your competitors have already signed up. I'm Kenny, founder of Brim and the host of the AI Opportunity. Welcome back to the AI Opportunity. Super excited this week to have both Larry Robbins and Kevin Broyles on the show. Now, I think both Kevin and Larry have got a lot to offer this audience, coming from what is a world that is normally quite conservative law with a world that is fast changing AI. And so super excited to have both Larry and Kevin on the show. They bring what is really combined over 60 years of legal experience, working for preeminent firms, and then now running one of the large, fast-growing firms in the US. And super excited to really just, delve in and talk a little bit more about Kevin, Larry's story, and also the work they do at FisherBroyles. Yeah, we're all excited to talk to you about AI and law.
Yeah, you took me aback with that 60 years. Would it be rude if I said 45 years of those are Larry and just 15?
I'm glad you did, because I would have otherwise.
I did see you interrupt then, and I was thinking, Kevin's not that old, but we combine the years. Larry would be...
It's the filters.
No, brilliant. Well, Kevin and Larry, maybe Kevin, you can start by telling us a bit about FisherBroyles, and in particular, obviously you're the founder of FisherBroyles, and the kind of origin story would be awesome. And then how did you get lumped in with Larry? How did you guys find each other? That's always a fun story.
Okay. Well, first of all, I need to clarify I'm the co-managing partner and co-founder, because if James Fisher watches this, we get all kinds of trouble. But FisherBroyles, we've been around coming up on 25 years next April, and we like to think of ourselves, you'd mentioned that the legal profession tends to be conservative. I think we're one of the most creative and innovative law firms probably in the last 120 years, since Paul Cravath started the old model that most firms currently follow today. We were technology-based from the beginning. We took this was before technology could really do what it allows us to do today and a lot of other firms. When we started, people working remotely during COVID would not have really been possible, or it would have been much more painful. We were already set up to do that, but we started out as a low overhead, technology-based law firm that wanted to get rid of a lot of the inefficiencies that traditional law firms suffer from, which includes a leveraged model of young associates, a lot of real estate, a lot of other overhead that isn't necessarily adding any value to the client. So James Fisher and I met in 2000 at a technology Am Law 200 firm that was focused primarily on technology. And so we were heavily invested in working with emerging growth companies, and we kind of got that bug about being more innovative, utilizing technology to change the world. And that's how FisherBroyles got its start. The beautiful thing from our perspective is every time there's a technological advance, it helps us. It makes it easier for us to compete against the traditional dinosaur type law firms that are heavily bogged down with technology and real estate. Larry's just one of the entrepreneurial visionaries who have joined us along the way. He's a trademark partner in Boston, and he's been with us a few years now. And I know he's on here because he's one of our partners who's leading the way utilizing AI. So, we've got a law firm of almost 200 partners who are very innovative when it comes to technology use. And things have been going well for us. And it seems like every time there's a black swan event, it helps FisherBroyles. And AI is the latest black swan event. COVID was the previous one that helped us because we've been working remote for many, many years. And now it's accepted after COVID. So 2020 was not a bad year for us.
Brilliant. I mean, Larry, you've obviously got decades and decades of experience at top IP firms and working in sort of prestigious firms across the US. What convinced you to join Kevin and the other co-founder when it comes to what is essentially quite an innovative model in law, right? A distributed model. What was the driver there for you?
Well, I have to confess that I did not even know that FisherBroyles existed September of 2017. I received a headhunter call who described the practice model, the way the firm operates, and my reaction was, this is really just too good to be true. but I reviewed it, reviewed all of the kind of the description and the structure of how how the firm operated with my accountant. We couldn't poke any holes in it, so I went forward with the interview process, and I'm now in my ninth year with the firm, and it was by far the best professional decision I ever made. The attraction was the flexibility that the firm offers to manage your practice the way that you want to, flexibility with billing rates, with billing alternatives, to be able to integrate tools into your practice, which I think has become increasingly clear in the age of AI. And I can't not mention the compensation structure and the fact that the firm does not have compensation committees and all the politics around compensation that you experience at other law firms. You know that if you do your work, you are going to get your rewards. And I think that is an extremely important selling point for this firm.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, look, just to jump straight into the deep end for both of you, it seems to me that FisherBroyles has a bit of a structural advantage in some respects, right? Like you said, you don't have an office, you have a distributed model. It's a really interesting moment in history for all because AI, in many respects, is accelerating those with structural advantages. How do you feel that AI is accelerating you guys? Like, what's the experience on the ground?
Well, it's early yet, but you ignore AI at your own peril. We are allowing our partners to be very creative and utilize different resources. Our main focus as a law firm, and this has always been our main focus, is how can we enable our partners to be more successful? That's our job as management. It's no different with AI. We basically set up the guardrails within the firm to make sure that it's a responsible use of AI because that is one of the leading problems today in law firms is the irresponsible use of AI or the improper supervision of the AI associate. So our main goal is to find the best of breed solutions out there, but to also enable our partners to be creative in what they need in their particular practice area. Because our approach has never been one size fits all, and we're taking that same approach with AI.
Really, it sounds like your sort of managing team and the individual partners have real kind of latitude to use technology to find leverage for the organization. Is that the best sort of description, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. A lot of traditional firms have a top-down management approach where they put shackles on the partners. Our view is that these are very smart individuals. They're in the best position to know what they need to satisfy their clients. So we try to empower our partners and give them a lot of autonomy within a defined structure so that we're still regulated as a law firm. So we have to be careful about that. And we have to protect the client's interests first and foremost. So we're not going to do anything reckless that might jeopardize client confidentiality or the level of services that we provide. But AI is a powerful tool that we know we need to utilize to make our partners even more efficient. We're probably the most efficient law firm that you've ever heard of, but we want to keep that on the forefront. So it's a balancing act between making sure we don't cross any lines. We stay efficient, but we provide our partners with the tools that they need to even be more competitive in the marketplace.
And Larry, obviously you've had a lot of experience outside of this model. What is it that you feel that breaks around the traditional law firm model when you think about AI? So, in the context of how traditional law firms work and how firms like yours work now.
I'd answer that question two ways. The most obvious answer, and the answer that you hear all the time, is the stress that AI places on the traditional leveraged model that a traditional law firm operates under. AI can perform the functions of junior up to mid-level associates accurately and thoroughly enough to make them essentially unnecessary in producing client work. So that puts pressure on a model that relies on leveraging a number of young associates and paralegals in order to generate revenue to maintain the income level that an equity partner at a traditional firm is accustomed to receiving. For us, in particular, AI turbocharges every advantage that this firm had structurally before AI came into the picture. We were always going to operate more efficiently simply because we're operating as a principally partner firm at partner level billing rates, which are, admittedly higher than some of the associate and paralegal rates that you might find at other firms, but still lower than partner rates simply because we don't have the overhead to cover. But because we can now use AI to generate a lot of the basic work that goes into a legal project before you need partner level expertise to bring that project to a conclusion, we can work much faster, much more efficiently, and provide, I would argue, an even better work product than we could before, and to continue to do so in a manner that is more favorable to the client, both in terms of outcomes and in terms of expense.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the listeners to this show, everyone would have had an experience where they've had to sort of pay either external counsel, or they have a law firm on retainer, or they're working in some jurisdiction where they're always seeking some sort of advice from a legal expert. But in some respects, AI also lowers the bars, right, to the average layperson to understand a little bit more. What do you think the shape of lawyers' role is going to be, especially in the commercial world, making sure that when you use AI, you use it safely and things can go wrong?
Mhm.
It'd be really good to unpack that because, I'm an entrepreneur. I like to check things from a legal perspective. But yeah, what am I missing about what AI does to the legal model in that context?
Well, I think it can be a very powerful tool for the individual who historically does not have access to sophisticated legal services, but it also has the potential to create an enormous amount of trouble. There's a case here recently where a woman settled an employment type issue, and she went to ChatGPT, I believe it was, and asked to analyze the case. And ChatGPT came up with 35 different claims that she could have made, but she'd already settled the case with prejudice. So she'd already gotten her check from the insurance company. But based on the advice she got from ChatGPT, she filed a second case, which was barred. And it ended up costing the insurance company a lot of money to defend that. It wasted the court's resources, all because ChatGPT or whichever AI tool she utilized didn't tell her that you could have made these claims, but they're no longer any good because you settled the case. So that kind of situation is problematic. I think from the higher level sophisticated work, you're probably going to have less of that, because ultimately, if you're a CEO or a general counsel, especially of a corporation, fundamentally you need someone to blame, right? If something goes wrong. If you're using AI as an in-house lawyer to handle work that a prominent firm would have handled in the past, and something goes wrong, you don't get to fire AI. When the CEO walks into your office and says, "Who messed up?" you can no longer point to the law firm that you've used and say, "We need to fire this law firm. They made a mistake." Then it's, "Well, I used AI instead of the law firm." And then the head that gets chopped is the in-house lawyer. So I don't think you're going to have as much reliance or sole reliance on AI from the commercial perspective in large law firms. I mean, large corporation. But there are efficiencies that are going to be imposed upon traditional law firms, because these corporations aren't going to pay for first, second, and third year lawyers to go out there and be trained while the client pays for that training. They're going, and that trend had been happening for the last 20 years, when large corporations are saying, "Hey, outside law firm, you're not allowed to use first, second, third years on our work anymore." And the big challenge that poses for traditional law firms is that's the very foundation upon which their economic model is built. They bring young lawyers out of law school, they pay them an enormous amount of money, and then they bill them out about 3 times what they pay them. So that's an enormous source of revenue. AI is structured to eliminate that source of revenue, which is why a traditional firm that's built on a pyramid of associates is in the biggest trouble in the legal field when it comes to AI's adoption.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think there are a lot of industries that are facing these real structural headwinds. I mean, it's interesting. You have the advantage of the sort of last 20 years of probably seeing this structural change from a long distance away, and now probably well positioned for it. But outside of law, like I said, a lot of industries are suffering this challenge. So how did you think about that in terms of leveraging technology to take advantage. This is a broader question than just AI. I think AI is this moment to take advantage of what was obvious change that was going to happen to an industry. Because in many respects, the way you're talking about it, Kevin, it's almost like in 20 years' time, the traditional law firm is dead. Is that fair to say? Or
I think you're absolutely right. That is fair to say. And the
so,
interesting thing is, although we didn't do this, you could almost look back 24 years ago and say they purposely built this firm to take advantage of AI when it comes around in 24 years, because we believe from the very beginning that the most valuable resource a law firm had was the wisdom and experience of its sophisticated partners, its lawyers, not the first, second, third years who don't know what they're doing, but people like Larry, who's done this for many, many years. I think you said 60 earlier. But
Really,
that kind of person is the gold of your law firm. And AI, that's the one type of lawyer AI cannot replace. AI cannot replace the judgment, the wisdom, the experience, the intuition of an attorney who's handled the types of matters that person is handling many, many, many times before. And that's primarily the only attorneys we have at our firm are those people. So if you look at the scale of disruption, the traditional law firm that's built on 2 to 3 associates for every partner, they're on the far end where they're going to be most disrupted. And then the firm like ours, who's built on mostly partner, we're going to be the least disrupted. So those kinds of efficiencies, I mean, I wish I could say I was Nostradamus, but I didn't predict this, but it sure looks like it when you look at the structure of our law firm.
No, I mean, it's a really interesting point. I just want to double down on a point that you've made, a theme really, which is the associate and what happens to the associate. I mean, maybe Larry, you could give me your thoughts, because you must have trained, countless numbers of associates that have worked under you. What do you think happens to the future of future lawyers in this new environment? Because, we're talking about structural advantage, and it seems like you guys have got that in spades. But at the same time, if the model doesn't work anymore, are there going to be as many lawyers tomorrow as there are today? I mean, Larry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, and I have only thought about it hypothetically for obvious reasons, since our firm does not have associates. So I have to kind of put myself back in time 10 years when I was last in that situation. And my answer to that question is I think we're talking more of an impact on numbers of associates as opposed to whether or not this is an existential event that is going to end associate law lawyers forever. I think there are always going to be a need for junior people, and it's just not going to be as many of them. Those junior people, if they want to succeed, I think have to come to firms with already having a very strong base in understanding how to work with AI. And it wouldn't really hurt to have a pretty strong base in the area of law in which they want to practice, but I think they can get that over time. So I would see less associates doing more work because of AI as opposed to associates disappearing off the face of the legal landscape completely.
That makes sense. So it's not an extinction level event for associates, but it is a potentially less of them doing more meaningful work. So if you're an associate listening right now, you've probably got a really bright future where there's scope to do even more, but AI is going to have some effect on the wider industry. That makes sense. I think themes like that across much of the world of work at the moment. I have a question for you, Kevin, which I think is one a lot of leaders would like to know right now, which is, from what I can understand of your model, you have this distributed model with, really talented, capable partners, and they've got some latitude on how they leverage technology and then presumably bring back those learnings into kind of the mothership, right? So how do you deal with disseminating improvement? So if Larry learns something and one of your other partners needs to benefit from that, what does that look like? Because transformation and technology transformation, I think, is a challenge a lot of organizations are going through right now. And I don't know, do you have any good anecdotes yourself of how you thought about that? How do you spread the advantage across the organization?
Well, I think one key to effective management is understanding your limitations and what you don't know and utilizing those who do know. So we have a lot of really smart attorneys. We have a lot of PhDs within our firm, and it's about empowering them to take the lead and relying on what they do. So it's very collaborative. We have committees that meet regularly. One talks about AI. The others are focused on various topics. But what we have realized a while back is if you watch, usually people will distinguish themselves. And once they start to distinguish themselves, then the firm comes in and says, okay, you seem to have a particular expertise or a passion for this area. Let's empower you to take a leadership role and move this forward. So it's very organized in a somewhat unorganized way. We allow really smart people who we trust because they're partners to try different things with firm oversight. But it's more of an empowerment situation than it is a restrictive situation. We try not to be a bottleneck in management. We try to be the means to the end that we're all looking for, which is to provide sophisticated work more efficiently and to be successful as a group of partners.
Can I add to that answer?
Please.
So to give you a specific example, in our monthly brand management practice group meetings, we have a section exclusively dedicated to AI development, how partners in the group have been using AI, which tools they've been experimenting with, whether or not they're useful or not. And we share that information with each other so that people can adopt best practices using AI. And as Kevin mentioned, there's a more broad firm-based group that does essentially the same thing.
Okay, awesome. So there is really a sort of like a cooking and eating exercise where people are going out, trying the tools as a proactivity around, let's actually see, what is out there. And then you're bringing it internally and sharing it amongst each other, just in the good old fashioned way of sitting around the table and saying, this could help our firm. I think that's a really practical lesson for a lot of companies because many companies are struggling with this exact challenge now, which is what do we use? There are so many shiny AI tools out there right now. How do you even go about thinking about how you take on AI? So there's what you've described, Kevin, Larry, which is you learn from the colleagues. But then I guess one thing I want to throw back at you, Kevin, is that when we spoke before, it seems like you've been pitched by a lot of organizations about AI. So what mental models have you used to think about what AI looks like in your firm long term? How are you thinking about it?
Well, at the moment, we believe that AI is still somewhat in its adolescent stage. You cannot ignore it. If you ignore it, you're going to be in big trouble. But you also can't jump in with a multi-million-dollar spend on a technology that isn't fully developed yet. And the challenge, as we were speaking of, and Larry and I were talking about this earlier this week, is that if you look at AI as the smartest programmer to ever be existing on the face of the earth, you also need to understand that everyone has access to that same programmer. This is not a situation where you go out and you hire a resource that is a finite resource and only one company can hire that resource. So the challenge that presents is there are a lot of companies that have popped up to say, well, we're going to do legal AI. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. The question is, well, what prevents someone else from doing the exact same thing for less? What if your name isn't Anthropic or Google or XAI, then you may not be in existence in 12 months. Because what happens when you come up with this really cool AI tool that utilizes Microsoft, and then Microsoft comes in and says, well, we've done it ourselves. We're going to put you out of business. So it's a challenge to not fall in love with the latest and greatest, the most popular AI tool. It's really a balance between a marathon and a sprint. I don't think it's really either. You have to find that area in between where you're approaching AI at the correct speed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess the real challenge is, like you say, there's a lot of shiny things. And I know in the legal space in particular, there are a lot of venture capital that's gone into it, some big names that are sort of throwing a lot of money at that space. But it's interesting, the theme you've talked about though, Kevin, which is that you don't want to kind of dive into an adolescent market. So are you guys thinking about AI as being kind of long-term asset for the business? Is this about long-term strategic value? You also talked about this idea that like, what's to stop other people from doing it? I guess in some respects, it's also the case of if you buy a tool off the shelf that gives you certain capabilities, but your competitor can do exactly the same thing. How do you build competitive advantage? So how are you solving those problems?
That's kind of a different question.
I love throwing questions, Larry.
And what you're asking kind of brings to mind the Kirkland and Ellis announcement that they're spending $500 million on building an internal AI system, which is one thing. The other thing, and I think they're going to find, that this to be true. But when we look at tools and we're implementing tools, they're not platform tools necessarily, although we've looked at those. They're practice specific tools that help perform certain of the functions that we've already done, but to do so in a better way. And, obviously I can only speak directly to my practice, which is trademark and copyright, but the tools out there for trademark search and watch and for research and drafting office action responses and competitive research and the like are great, but they are only a more efficient way of gathering and presenting data to me. That data only becomes valuable when I review it for a client and apply my judgment and experience and can identify for them what the risks of moving forward or not moving forward would be. A platform doesn't do that. A platform is a way of presenting that information, but it does not get rid of that final judgment layer, which is where our value is and will always be, and it seems unlikely to be replaced by AI.
Yeah, no, I think the saying that's going out at the moment is sort of like AI gives you all the intelligence and reasoning in the world, but it doesn't give you judgment and understanding. And fundamentally, that's what I think any sort of commercial organization would pay a lawyer for, right? Is the deep judgment and the deep understanding. I guess in terms of sort of what you're finding from a people change perspective, it seems like you've really probably not had those problems at all, right? Because the organization is shaped around innovative kind of self-starters. But given you had so much success with implementing technology and your model is not the traditional law firm, what are 3 lessons that you might be able to offer to kind of other professional services businesses, not even just law firms, but, kind of accountants and architectural firms that all have similar regulatory requirements, albeit totally different professions? What are some tips that you might be able to give them? Because it's a difficult world right now, right? Knowing where to even start and how to deal with all these tools being thrown at us. And yeah, what would you say, Kevin? And then maybe Larry next.
I would say stay calm. I think that panicking in either direction is very dangerous and can lead to missteps. So that's probably number one. I think a second thing is I would focus on those things that make you irreplaceable. So using you as an example, AI can't conduct this interview. That's the one thing probably. There's probably other things, but that's the one thing that uniquely is proprietary to you. You've done this before. You're good at it. You're responding in real time. You're using your intuition and your judgment. Now, you may prepare notes for the interview. AI can do that. So if you're going to utilize AI, utilize it for the areas that allow you to spend more time on the core competencies that really make you special for who you are. And whichever professional service you're in, I think that's a good rule of thumb to use when it comes to AI or really anything, any tool that you use. I'd probably have to think of a third one, but those are the first 2 that come off the top of my head.
No, brilliant.
I'll give you another one.
Go for it, Larry.
I would say take the long view. I've heard a lot of lawyers who I've talked to about AI just in conversation saying, yes, I tried that and it couldn't do that. I'm not going to use it. That is an approach that is probably guaranteed to significantly undermine your practice moving forward. Take a look at where we were a year, 2 years ago and where we are today and all the things that we said back then. Well, I can't do that. Well, now it can do that. And to think that now AI is gone as far as it's going to go, and that another year from now, if not less, it's going to be able to do a lot of the things that we say it doesn't do well now is a naive and dangerous viewpoint. And I think that you have to embrace it. You can't fight it. And if you want to be able to adapt, move forward, you need to be thinking about it in the context of every business decision that you make, how it helps you, and not focus on the negatives because it's here to stay. Regardless of how many people rail against it for whatever reasons, this cat is out of the bag. I mean, and it's going to keep going forward.
What a way to wrap up. The cat is out of the bag and positivity. I think that's a really great way to summarize. And guys, I've really enjoyed having you on the show. I'm so grateful. I've had fun. I hope you've had fun too. And the audience are going to really, really appreciate the real grounded experience that you've had, especially from a profession that I think from a lot of people on the outside, they never imagined that there's AI innovation happening. So thank you both guys for your time. Yes, how can people find out more about your firm?
Yeah, go to FisherBroyles.com, FisherBroyles.com, and you can do a deep dive. We're both on LinkedIn as well. You can find us there or on brilliant podcasts like you're hosting.